Throckmorton Theater is a beautiful theater. And after the show, Robin Williams showed up. And because he lives nearby, he just showed up at the club and he would just do pop-ins. And after the
Wow.
show, we were actually put in your full energy, or you have some residual incomes that's supporting your passion, or your passion itself is supporting you financially, or you have rich parents or somebody who's helping you bootstrap.
How do you become a good host? Give me some tips.
When you say host, are you talking about live shows or TV
Yeah, sure.
shows
Live
or?
shows. Well, welcome to the show, Naveed Bhai. How are you doing, Ajke?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. How's your days going? How are things?
Days are going, alhamdulillah, very well, very busy. I've been in New York City for the last few months because I'm
Okay.
trying to get back into the mainstream US comedy scene. So really hustling. And I'm here till December 16. Then I go back to Bangladesh, but I'm looking to go back and forth. So been
So,
very busy with doing shows, networking, getting myself out there, making myself known. That's really the hustle you have to go through. So that's really keeping me very, very busy here in New York City.
how's the comedy scene in New York? I know it's very tight. It's like you have to go around and just find the best shows, right?
Well, this they call it the capital city of the stand-up comedy scene, and they do say it for a reason, because it is the highest concentration of shows, venues, clubs, comedians. You just name it. It's brutally competitive, getting stage time. So being here is really the way to know where you stand among all the comics, and that's the reason I'm here. It's extremely competitive.
I'll talk more about comedy, but let's just do a quick background of who you are and your education. I know you went to UC Berkeley, if I'm not wrong, for your MBA.
I did, but I'm a dropout. I didn't finish.
Okay. And then you worked for a startup right after that.
Beg your pardon?
You worked for a startup right after that, if I'm not wrong, or was it before?
Well, I had been working for a long time, even prior to going to business school.
Right.
So basically, I got my bachelor's in electrical engineering from
Okay.
Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology, and right away came to the US, got my master's in electrical engineering at the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. And then I
Hmm.
worked for a long time. And then I went to business school while working, but didn't finish, just quit before that. But I did work at a startup company among several other companies in the US as well as in Bangladesh.
How was your experience here? How was your experience with, firstly, I would say the studies, and then as you navigated through your career and started the initial part of your early career?
Everything's been great. As I look back, I don't think there's a single moment in life that is not productive, that is not something that doesn't teach you something. So, from that perspective, I think my life in school, college, university, however we want to define it, has been absolutely phenomenal. Learned a lot. And especially after I came to the US, when I went to grad school, I found out that schooling here, especially in the United States, is, as you also know, is very demanding, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it's extremely fulfilling. Not to say that it's not back in Bangladesh, but many times, as I look back now in Bangladesh, we take things for granted. We get things so easily, especially if we go to public schools, public universities. We actually are getting world class education, but we are getting it at a very subsidized rate,
Yeah.
if not free. And we tend to take it for granted. We don't
Hmm.
realize how much we're getting, how much the government is actually paying to subsidize education for us, and we take it for granted. Then once I came to the US and I look back, oh my God, we had such good opportunities. Thank God I utilized it, but many of us fail to utilize it to the fullest. So that was
Hmm.
an appreciation in retrospect. Many times we think, okay, am I really learning in Bangladesh? My point is that it reminds me of a professor we had at BOET, Professor Mateen. He said that if you want to learn, you can learn anywhere. If you don't want to learn, you can go to the best school in the world, Harvard, MIT, and you will not
Yeah.
learn. So I think it's really the mindset. So, in long story short, the experience in Bangladesh was amazing. And the best part is that we never had to worry about the finances part because everything was so subsidized, if not free, at least
Yeah.
with the public schools. And it was great education. Then I came to the US, and here I got that appreciation because here people have to pay so much to go to school. And fortunately, I had full funding, but I knew that
Mm.
most people didn't have it. So they would really have to scramble to get their finances together to educate themselves, sometimes having to work. to pay for their school. And then the schooling itself is phenomenal because it teaches you to actually think rather than
Yeah.
to depend on memory, on rote memory. So that was a different dimension of education. And then after that, when I started working, it was everything was coming together. Oh yeah, so I learned this in school. Oh yeah, I learned that even in grade 8. Everything is now making sense. So everything has been a phenomenal journey, a superb experience.
I saw your TED talk or one of your, I think, shows in Bangladesh you were doing with Zarapu, if I'm not wrong. And you guys talked about a period when your startup closed down and you guys were all informed that you all are laid off, right? I want to talk about this with you because I want to know at that moment what was going through your head, because nowadays what happens with Gen Zs and all of us is if something goes wrong, we all start panicking right at the moment, and it's like life is over. But certain times in life, situations like that will come, and it's unavoidable. So, what was your mindset during that phase of your life?
Well, the mindset was the same. It's not a question of Gen Z or A or X or Alpha. When crisis hits at that moment, you too panic, no matter which generation you belong to. So it's
Okay.
not specific to Gen Zs. It happened to us. Even if it happens to me now, I will panic.
Okay.
It's almost not normal to not be panicked.
Hmm.
But what we did at that time, in this particular incident, was in California. I was in at a startup company called Wingcast, and one fine morning we shut down. 200 people just went home, and it was definitely something that hit me for the first time in my life. I know many millions of people have gone through this in the
Hmm.
past, are going through this today, and
Yeah.
will go through something similar in the future. But for me, it was the first, knowing that I had a job, now I don't have a job. A paycheck is gone. And it was definitely a very scary proposition. But that's when Zara also said that, que sera, sera, life goes on. And fortunately, she had a job. So we at least had a paycheck. So, and I think eventually, if you have the right intentions in Bangla, we say, or Arabic, we say niyat, inna malam
Hmm.
illa bin niyat. If your niyat
Yeah.
or your intentions are good, I think the creator makes things easy for you. And I think, inshallah, that, alhamdulillah, that's what happened. So even right now, we are going through a different kind of crisis. We went through a different kind of crisis a couple of years back. And I'm sure it's not the end. But the whole point is to, okay, fine, it's happened. Now let's move on. Let's try to resolve a solution. And from that perspective, I would really recommend people read this book. It's a very easy read. It's called Who Moved My Cheese? You can literally finish this
Who
book
moved
in
my
half an hour,
cheese?
45 minutes. Who Moved My Cheese?
Okay.
And I remember at my first job in Michigan, my boss said, Naveed, read this book. And I think that was a life changing experience. It's really, I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but if anybody wants to read it, it's really big fonts. You can, it's like an allegory about two mice, but it really tells you about how to handle crisis in life and how to manage changes in life. And you can literally finish this reading this book in a half an hour, 45 minutes. I'm not saying I'm a speed reader. It's just that the
Mhm.
book has so very few words, but says so many things.
Let's talk about your transition to, I think you were the CEO and chairman of IBM Bangladesh. And
I was not the chairman. I was the CEO of IBM in Bangladesh. Yes.
okay, so I talk about that because IBM here, a lot of my friends graduating right now these days, I see a lot of them going into IBM here as consultants and working at IBM. And it's a very, I would say, they call it, or as we know it, a very prestigious firm. And it's like a dream job for a lot of people, right? And you being the CEO and especially representing the whole country as the head of the country, how was that experience? How did you like it?
It was amazing that, first of all, it was an honor to be able to have served in that position. And it's also very intimidating when you have that honor. Their expectations are so high. And every moment was exciting. Every moment was challenging. Every moment was a learning experience. And definitely, I've come out much better. And it was definitely a pleasure, a big honor to have
Yeah,
had that position. And it's a very prestigious company. And we were working with one of the biggest cell phone operators in Bangladesh called
yeah.
Airtel.
Hmm.
So we were doing their managed services. Basically, that company's full IT backend was being run by IBM, which is a big business portfolio, if not the biggest big business portfolio of IBM all around the world.
Yeah.
Basically, you have a company, you don't want to have this headache, we'll manage your IT. And it was a mission critical job. That means if anything goes wrong, that means their system is down. If their system is down, that means they take a hit on revenues. It was a very stressful job in the sense that there was literally no margin for error. And
Yeah.
as a CEO, it was a 24/7 job because at the end of the day, and especially in that part of the world, things had escalated to the top. The CEO of Airtel is calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning if something's wrong, just to escalate, and I have to take that call. And at the end of the day, the CEO is the person who has to say that he or she is the one who's fully responsible. The buck stops with him. I can
Yeah.
never have the luxury to say that, okay, well, I don't know why this happened. Such and such department or group has made this mistake. I can't say that. I have to say that I'm sorry, we made a mistake. We will rectify the situation. The buck stops here. So it is a position of tremendous responsibility. And this goes with any
Hmm.
no matter how big or small that group is, because you have to take ownership and accountability. So that comes with a lot of stress, but at the same time, a lot of gratification if you do the job right.
Looking back, do you think there was any particular thing which prepared you to take on that role, or was there any you would say, let's say when people are coming out of college, getting into their corporate career, starting off from the very bottom and wanting to rise up to reach a position like that? What are some of the maybe advices or lessons that you give for them?
The biggest lesson I would say is that no matter what job you have, do it seriously, enjoy it. Don't complain. We tend to complain. I used to complain too when I was starting off. I used to complain about my boss. Why is he telling me to do this? Why is he telling me to do that? But eventually, when I took up these leadership positions, I understood why my boss was telling me to do such and such thing. So the advice I would give to anybody and everybody is that when you get into a job, don't complain. If the hours are insane, you work insane hours because you're young. This is the time you learn. This is the time you put everything that you learned in school. And when I say school, I mean college, university, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it.
Yeah.
And then you're putting everything you're applying everything, and you are also learning so much more on the job that you will never have the chance to learn through textbooks. So brace that opportunity. It is a golden opportunity given on a platter, and the best part of it is that you're getting paid to learn. You don't have to worry about a paycheck at the end of the month. You are learning, and even adverse situations that you face, that is also a learning process. I remember at my first job in the US in Michigan, I had a boss who was I was having a lot of stress working with that boss, and his boss, the director of the company, said, Naveed, even managing your boss is a learning experience. And after so many
Mm.
years, I realized that he's so right. So it really trains me to handle so many different types of situations, to learn a lot. So don't complain. This is your golden opportunity because at one point, either you will take the entrepreneurial route and have your own company and your own business, and you will realize you're putting all of those experience into play. Or you might become a CEO or a vice president, and then now you are have to be able to handle all these situations. The situation that you are facing now as a entry level MTO, now this
Yeah.
big leader knows how to handle the MTO because he himself was an MTO at one point. So
Mm.
this is something I really say, embrace all these opportunities. I see many people, they complain, oh, I've been transferred to a small town in Chittagong,
Yeah.
in Bandarban. I want to be in Dhaka. Come on, if you're in Bandarban, you're probably having a much better opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
Embrace it. This is number one. And number two, a very unique experience of mine was that I actually took 3 years off between 2006 and 2009.
Hmm.
That's when I quit my job. I had some investments. We had some investments. We cashed out. And I actually quit Berkeley. That time, 3 years, I was home raising a child on my own. And in the United States, you don't have any help. You have to do
Oh
everything
my God.
24/7,
I can
365.
imagine.
So my wife Dara was continuing on with getting her Berkeley MBA. I quit.
Yeah.
I stayed home. And those 3 years, I think, prepared me to be a very good CEO. Many people think, and I really want to say this to all the companies are hiring people out there, that they always look at a mother coming back to the workforce saying, "Hey, you have been a stay-home mom for the last 4 years, so you are behind in your career." Take it from me. I did exactly that same job minus the breastfeeding. I'm not capable of doing that, but everything else I did. And when I went back to the workforce, they did ask me that question. Naveed, you haven't worked for 3 years. How will you be a better CEO? I said, I will be a better CEO because I know now how to manage EQ, emotional quotient, because I have to work 24/7, 365. My sleep pattern is all messed up because I have a little baby with
You have a
me
little
who
baby.
my schedule has to work around her schedule. And that when she's sleeping, if I'm well rested, this is when I really have to get my work done. So I'm really getting a boot camp training in time management. And then when a woman has a baby, many of you know, or if you don't know, they go through this thing called a postpartum depression. This
Hmm.
means once the woman has a baby for several years, she will go through this postpartum, means post childbirth depression. That means she is going to go through emotional ups and downs, and it is very normal thing to do, to happen. And people around that woman needs to be aware of that condition and be very empathetic, sympathetic, and cooperative with that person. So for 3 years, I'm in a situation when I'm handling a lot of emotion of an adult as well as an emotion of a little infant. So I think I was very well versed in that soft training aspect. So when you're back in work, you're the CEO or you're the leader of a group, you're at the end of the day working with people with different personal issues, with different personalities. And I think this experience really prepared me to be a good leader. And I do remember before joining IBM, I was the CEO of Nokia Siemens Networks.
Yeah.
And at my farewell party, one of my colleagues, and I use the word colleague, I never say subordinate or teammate, I say colleague because everybody's a colleague. He, in his speech, said these words, and it stuck to me. He said, I've had the opportunity to work with many CEOs, but this time, meaning working with me, he said, I had the opportunity to work with a leader. And I definitely attribute a lot of that to those 3 years I was home raising a child, in addition to all these years of experiences working in a company, ranging from Fortune 500 company to startups.
Fun fact, I think your daughter and I went to the same school, Sir John Wilson. Telling one of my junior friends that I'm interviewing, having a call with you today. And then they were like, oh, yeah, her dad is Naveed Mahbub. And I'm like, wow, that's great. But that's nice. And
Well, I
then what
think you just
happened?
gave away my age also. So,
Let's see, after IBM, so after you're done with your IBM role, your CEO role, do you quit and then you start thinking of comedy? Or when does the whole comedy aspect and taking comedy full time come into your mind?
actually, comedy was always there on the side because I started in 2005. And
Yeah.
2006 to 9 is when I quit my job in the United States and doing
Okay.
comedy full time. Then I got back into the job arena in 2009 at Nokia Siemens Networks in Bangladesh, and then I went to IBM and I worked for another several years before I quit again to be a comedian full time.
Yeah.
So the life of a comedian was started 2005 and is continuing to go on now in its
Yeah.
19th year. So when I was working, this was happening on the side, and those years that I haven't worked, so 2006 to 2009, and again 2014 or 15 till now, I'm doing it full time.
When you left your corporate life behind for doing it full time, I'm sure you were thinking of some risks, right? Because usually what I see back home, especially in Bangladesh, with my friends who are thinking of taking, like some sort of creative role, some sort of creative passion or creative full time profession. There's always that. Firstly, the societal pressures that they face, and the secondly, the financial pressures that they face, right? So how did you like come out of that? How did you battle that, or how did you kind of prepare yourself for that?
Again,
Because
there are
I'm
two
sure,
aspects.
like I was saying,
Yeah,
because
do
I'm sure, like from IBM coming out, you were on a very high beneficial package, right? And it was very rewarding. And then just coming out of that into a full time comedian, how was that?
so the comedy is show business, just like
Yeah,
any other form of show business, and there are two parts to it. There's a show part, there's a business part.
yeah,
Now, coming from a corporate background, I had to ensure that I also look into the business part of it,
business
and
part.
by that, you have to look at show as a business because as a comedian, at the end of the day, I'm a service provider, so I'm really there to serve the customer. So I had to, of course, take the business approach that, okay, I'm providing the service, but how do I make sure it's financially sustainable? So I had a business plan. And I looked at it, approached it exactly like a business. Here's the service. Who is my market? How do I service? What are the price points I need to work with? What are my costs? What are the margins I'm looking at? What are the addressable market? How do I scale up? How do I expanded internationally, and how do I diversify? How do I have residuals? So all these were actually carefully thought out, just like a business plan. And then when I quit, it was not that I had a sudden dip in my income. Of
Yeah,
course, it wasn't as close to what I was making as the CEO of IBM, but
yeah,
I had the math that, okay, fine, if it dips, at least if it's here, then I'm doing okay because at the end of the day, I have to support a family. Not
right,
that that my family was completely reliant on it because Dara was, and she's
for sure.
always been
Yeah,
she's been very supportive of it. But I had to make sure that there's that revenue flow to justify that I'm doing my job right. Okay,
hmm,
so I mean, just being a good comedian or an artist doesn't really matter. That revenue has to come in, which is also a measure of how well I'm doing. I'm executing my service. So all those were in plans. It was a combination of providing the service, meaning that doing shows, having TV shows, doing gigs, and then also having residuals. So that was
hmm,
a little bit of a diverse, not in media. I had something diversified where I have residual income, and alhamdulillah, I still do have it. So these were all carefully thought out. So my point is that if somebody wants to take the plunge, you need to think it out. It's not an emotional decision; it's a
yeah.
rational business decision. And
You
then another
mentioned,
thing you mentioned about
yeah,
societal pressure. That's something that individuals need to be able to handle. The thing is that are you putting a lot of emphasis on what society is saying, or are you saying, at the end of the day, I pay my own bills. So what the society is saying, they will say, and they are saying it for my benefit. They're not saying it out of any malice or anything. So they
yeah,
wish me well because they are also looking at your well-being. That look, you have a safety net, you're getting out of the safety net. Are you sure you're doing the right thing? That's the good intention they have when the society gives you so-called societal pressure. But then if you have a game plan, you can always go back and tell them, yeah, I understand, I appreciate your concerns, and I really feel for it, but this is my game plan, and this is a risk I'm taking. And then you take the risk instead of being combative about it. That a lot of times we are also getting very defensive with our society. Oh, you don't understand. You're so outdated. Rather than that, that's also a learning experience. Is that people will act, but how do you react is also an experience. You can always say, yes, fine. At the end of the day, talga stomach.
hmm, yeah. You started Naveed's Comedy Club, if I'm not wrong. What's your plan with that? What's I would say, what's like your business proposition with that?
Well, the business model is the same as everywhere in the world. The comedy club is a venue where the public comes to watch stand-up comedy and be entertained. So again, it's a service providing entity. The whole premise is to be able to be financially self-sustaining.
Hmm,
The way it works in the West is that, let's say, not even the West, anywhere in the world, a comedy club alone doesn't survive alone on the sale of tickets. More so in
yeah.
Bangladesh because we are a very new industry. We have good comics, but the price point isn't there because at the end
People
of the
want it for
day,
free,
it's
right?
not. Yeah, it's not at the end of the day, it's not how much the ticket price I would like to
Yeah.
set for my show or some other very famous shows comedians, the price point has to be what is the consumer willing to pay. Again,
Yeah.
it's a market dynamics. So you just cannot argue that. Somebody may be driving a Mercedes, but that person will say, I look at the value of a comedy show as taka 200 or 300.
Hmm.
So I have to work with that price point, not saying, oh, you can't afford it. Yes, they can afford it, but it's a question of what do they perceive the value of this entertainment or service that they're willing to pay. So we have to work with that market price point. That's what we work with, but that comes nowhere near where our costs are. So what we've done is that we have a food court at our
Right.
comedy
Yeah.
club,
Hmm.
and that food court sustains the comedy club. It's not that we make a lot of margin or anything, but we kind of sustain it so that that food court is able to sustain the comedy club such that we don't have to rely on the tickets.
You at least
In
hit
the
the break
West,
even.
yeah, because at the end of the day, in Bangladesh, people like to eat. No matter what they do, anytime they go out, they want to eat. So we said, okay, fine. They
Yeah.
want to eat, so let's have provision for them to eat at a very affordable price, because a lot of students, a lot of young people come, and affordability is definitely an issue. We want to
Yeah.
make sure that they are very happy with the quality of food they have. They're very happy with the price, and then they can go watch a comedy show. Everything is very much affordable. At the same time, it sustains the comedy club as far as its costs are concerned. In the West, they have a different business model. They say that you come to the comedy club, you pay X for the tickets, and then you are bound to purchase items at the venue,
Yeah.
food or beverages, whatever it be,
Yeah.
for a certain value. Now, we can't do that, and we will not do that. We
Hmm.
will not serve alcohol. We're not going to serve or anything that is, in my eyes, what we should not be. We want to make it a very family friendly environment.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you don't want to force them to spend money. So we have to be very innovative, and that's how we're doing it.
I really like how it's giving opportunity to the newcomers in the industry. I don't know. I haven't seen anything like it before, like the Naveed's Comedy Club before. Maybe it's because I'm not as involved in the market, but from what I've seen, like a lot of my even school seniors, Akhlaq Bhai, and some of them go there a lot. They perform there a lot. So I love it. I love to see it. And let me ask you this one question. For professionals, or let's say students, right? They're graduating, they're passionate about comedy, right? And they want to take this as a profession. You mentioned a few minutes back about the term sustainability. So, how do you think they should prepare for sustainability if they want to take this career forward? And if they want to do this full time? What's some of your
Again,
advice?
well, I mean, there's no one single advice, but already have mentioned what I did in my case.
Yeah.
But it really boils down to the fact that how marketable you are. And then do you think, I mean, this, when I say you, I'm talking to any potential person any person who's looking to take up stand-up comedy, potentially take up stand-up comedy as a full-time profession. You have to realize, you will know best as to how marketable you are, how well you are able to sell your service and enhance your brand equity to be able to sustain this living, not for just a year, a couple of years, but for probably the rest of your life. So you
Yeah.
have to think about that, how you're going to ensure the shelf life of this service or the product that you're providing. The service meaning you as a comedian. You really need to figure that out. You need to, maybe you are at that point, but then again, is the market ready to serve you? That, or rather sustain you? Will they be? We have 170 million people, but
Yeah.
that doesn't translate to the fact that they'll all be lining up to see your show, or maybe they will. And so, in order to do that, what do you need to do? Where do you need to go? How do you need to enhance your brand equity, your followers, so that no matter where you do your show, or whenever you do a show, people are lining up, product lines are running after you for you to endorse them, but also having that longevity that they're running after you today. Are they going to be running after you 5 years from now? Or is it that 5 years from now somebody else is going to come and take over your place? You have to plan all these out and then realize if you really want to do it full time or not.
And then let me ask you this, switching the gears a bit. You performed for both the Bangladeshi crowd and the US crowd, especially now that you're in the US, you're performing more and more. Do you think the how the crowd receives the message or the freedom that you have as a comedian differs from like what you had to do in the Bangladeshi audience versus US audience? What do you think sells more in both of these countries?
Actually, these are apples and oranges we are talking about. But one common denominator is that everybody, no matter which country you're in, people are smart
Yeah.
and they're intelligent. They're ready to laugh. They're willing to laugh. Who doesn't want to laugh? Because that is the best, one of the best kosher and stress reliever, right? So it is really the other way around. It is the job of the comedian to
Hmm.
be able to connect with that audience, whether that audience is in Bangladesh, in Dhaka or Chittagong or Rajshahi or in New York City, whether the audience are Bangladeshis listening to Bangla comedy or over here in New York City in English comedy. And even in New York, there are so many different kinds of audiences you can play with. There are the what you call the Desi audience, but they're Indians, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis who grew up in the US. So they are assimilated South Asians. There are the Asian audience. There are the African Americans. There are the Latinos. There are the white audience, very mainstream US audience. So there are different types of audience. But the
Yeah.
common denominator is that how do you connect with them? And that means that how do you identify what matters to them, what is related to them, relatable to them. Number one. Number two is that then talk about those topics. Third is that being intelligent enough, smart enough to make them laugh, but at the same time, at least in my opinion, not to offend them. Because there are shock jocks, what you call them. There are comics who do dark comedy. They push the envelope. They go do edgy material, and that is also part of the landscape.
Yeah.
My philosophy is that no, you know what? I'm going to push the envelope as much as I can, but I will talk about topics that relates to them and bring them in into my world, make them laugh. And if you do that, there's no audience that you will not be able to win over. Now you talk about the freedom. Again, freedom also comes with responsibility.
Hmm.
So it's not really a question that okay, fine, I have the freedom, but I'm gonna say it. I also have a responsibility to be able to judge whether I should say it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And at the end
100%.
of the day, people are people. Humans are humans with emotions. You cannot avoid the fact that somebody may be offended, and that person do exist in Bangladesh. Those people exist in the United States also.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of that one is superior over the other, or one has more, one gives you more leeway over the
Yeah.
other. But yes, in the United States, at least so far, there is a comics can talk about a lot of topics, probably which we can't back in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Okay, for either societal reasons or for legal reasons or because of the law of the land, whatever that may be.
Was there a show that you like if you think of it was your most memorable show or you enjoyed the most as a comedian?
It's hard to pinpoint one because I've been doing it for 19 years
Yeah.
and many shows have been highlights. And
What makes it a good
let's
show?
see if well, one I can say definitely was a highlight in a different way. This was in Marin County, which is north of San Francisco, and it was a club called the Throckmorton Theater. It's a beautiful theater. And after the show, Robin Williams showed up, and because he lives nearby, he just showed up at the club, and he would just do pop-ins. And after the
Wow.
show, we were just the two of us. We were in the green room for 30 minutes. It was a heart-to-heart talk, and it was almost like a one-on-one personal show he gave me because in person he's exactly the way we see him on stage or in movies. His mind, his narrative goes at lightning speed. So that was definitely a very, very memorable 30 minutes. And I attribute to that being a part of the show I was in. So
Mm.
that show was definitely a very memorable one.
Who's your favorite comedian?
Many, but George Carlin definitely stands out. He's passed away, but the reason I like him is that he's very intelligent. He's not necessarily what you call roful mao,
Mm.
funny. You're not going to roll on the floor, but it's really intelligent.
Yeah.
He pushes the envelope. He goes into territory which are very, very sensitive, but only
Yeah.
he is among the very few who can navigate in that sensitive territory, make you laugh, come out of it, and at the same time will not be offending people that much. Though he has offended people, but that's the reason I like him. So definitely. And if I were to talk about others who are still around, Dave Chappelle is definitely one of my favorites. Jim Gaffigan, I really love him because if you look at his comedy, it's those are on very simple topics about his kids, about his family, and he's very clean. I really like him. Another person I like is Eddie Izzard. He's a cross-dresser. He's a British comic, but he's very intelligent because he brings in a lot of history, talks about that. Who else do I like now a lot?
Hassan Minaj show on the Netflix, like the new one.
Yeah, I have, and I think is this the one where the he talks about his Brown family and everything?
Yeah, yeah. I think all his
I
shows talk
think,
about.
yeah, I think this is by far Hassan Minaj's best work. You
Oh,
can tell
really?
that he's a little older now.
Yeah,
He's more mature. He's valuing his roots, which probably he wasn't doing at a younger age. It is very normal. We as
yeah,
young people, we think our parents are so uncool, but then he's
yeah,
drawing a full circle and saying, at the end of the day, my parents, his parents are really the cool people. So I think he really not only was deep and funny, and he actually made a lot of people think with his special. In fact, I know him personally, so I texted him. He didn't respond, and I said, this is one of your best works. So we did. I used to know him. I mean, I still know him. We are on our cell phone.
yeah.
We have each other's numbers, and before he got big, I was working in the Los Angeles comedy scene, and we've done a lot of shows together. And even before the pandemic, he invited me over to the taping of his Patriot Act. So he invited
Damn.
me over to his studio as a VIP guest, and he personally, entertained me and my friends, and we got to see the taping. He came and spent time with me in the VIP room. He treated me very well. And that was the last really we communicated. And now, even once in a while, we do
Yeah.
communicate it. And for example, last year he got into trouble with the Washington Post or something
Yeah.
about, remember that? So he was going through a
I
very
heard
bad
about
time.
it.
So
Yeah.
I texted him. I said, I'm praying for you. And he wrote back, Naveed, thank you, Alhamdulillah. And he's a very polite person.
Yeah.
And, but, after this special, I texted him. I said, this was by far your best work. I haven't heard back from him. So,
Cool. We're coming to the end of the show. I don't want to take it off for too long, but let me ask you two questions before I end it, okay? The first question that I want to ask you, looking back, okay, if you were to say there was a time for the people, if you had to advise, give a last final few words and advice, um, do you think there's a good time when you can choose between pursuing passion over, a career that is already that you're already in? I asked that because, you left your corporate career for being full time comedian, right? And I'm guessing comedy was your full passion, right? And is there a perfect time when you choose that, like to choose passion over, what would I say, finance, or passion over your corporate career or whatever that is paying the bills? Like, of course, pays the bills as well, but when do you choose your passion to go full time?
well, in my case, if you recall, I mentioned
Yeah,
that I made the transition
yeah,
by provisioning for the finances. So if you
yeah,
don't provision for the finance and you switch over to passion, I don't know if you'll really be able to follow your passion because you're worrying all day about paying your bills.
hmm,
And that way you may not be able to pursue your passion unless you are a very rich person, you
yeah,
have somebody else paying your bills, which also falls under the definition of managing the finances. If you think you have that luxury, go for it. The
yeah,
sooner you can do that in life, the better. You're starting your passion as early as possible. And at the end of the day, passion does become a profession because if you look at all the very successful people, the best sportsmen, the best authors, they're following their passion, but the it's like a catch 22. The fact that they were able to follow their passion so well, they did so well, and the money came in, which was a
yeah,
manifestation of the fact that they're really doing a good job in their passion, which is now their profession. And then now the passion is a profession, and this passion doesn't make things look like it's work.
yeah,
So the bottom line is that the sooner you can do it in life, of course, the better.
yeah,
Now, the thing is that how do you make that transition? It's really an individual call.
hmm,
My personal advice is that you really need to have provision for the finances. however that may be. Either you have a part-time job, you're doing a part-time passion, or you have a full-time job and your job is allowing you to follow your passion uh, to a sufficient enough amount of time so that you can actually put in your full energy, or you have some residual incomes that's supporting your passion, or your passion itself is supporting you financially, or you have rich parents or somebody who's helping you bootstrap, no
Mm.
matter what that is. So, bottom line, of course, the sooner the better that you can make this transition, but also do provision for finances. Otherwise, you will not be able to, at least I think that you will not be able to pursue your passion if you have so much of mental stress on finances.
And lastly, it's a personal question from my side. I know you've hosted a quite of people. You have your hosting show as well. How do you become a good host? Give me some tips.
I mean, when you say host, are you talking about live shows or TV
Yeah, sure.
shows
Live
or
shows, shows like this, podcasts, which are going big nowadays.
I'm not doing any podcast. I'm thinking
Mm.
maybe I should start, but I had a late night TV show, which is kind of a
Yeah.
podcast. Actually, it's a turbo boosted podcast because you have a live audience and everything.
Hmm.
But as far as hosting is concerned, that a host's job is to keep the event or the show together. The host is never the main person. So
Yeah.
when I go to host, I said, okay, my job is to keep things together, keep the energy up. And in order to do that, I have to be in the moment. I cannot be in a script. I have to be in the moment.
Yeah.
That means acknowledging everything that is happening now rather than ignore it. So that's one way to be a good host. The other one is to be, let the guest take the floor or let the event that you're hosting. That's still the main thing. You're just like a shepherd there.
Yeah.
So as long as you keep things together. Now for live shows, for example, let's say I'm the MC and there are five people giving a speech. Different speeches will be different, will have different energy. Some will be very high energy, keeping everybody engaged. Another speech could be very low key and people are falling asleep. So, what do you do in that case as a host? A person has finished speaking and the person was low energy, people are falling asleep. This makes it very difficult for the next speaker to come up and speak to an audience who have already fallen asleep. So then
Mm.
you as a host would go up, you will maybe draw something in from the speech that just finished and say one or two things that draws up the energy of the room, then hand it over to the next speaker. So it makes it a little easy for the next speaker
Yeah.
to speak. Vice versa, somebody's very high energy finishes speaking, now a low energy person is coming. It'll be very difficult to follow that act. So now as a host, you go up, the energy in the room is so high, everybody's like super hyper
Super
in the room.
crazy.
Now
Yeah.
you take the audience, you start with a that same level of energy, very tactfully pull it down a little bit, now hand it over to the next speaker so that it's a little easier for him to come
Mm.
over and still retain this audience. This is one of many things. The other could be your, event is happening. Let's say there's a power outage. Now, instead of panicking, you as a host can say, "Oh well, it was getting cold anyway, so it's
Go
good
with the
we've had a
flow.
power outage. It's going to just
Yeah.
crack a joke or something."
Yeah.
Make the things easy. Acknowledge the crisis rather than ignore it. So
Hmm.
this is another way to keep it up. So the whole idea, bottom line, is of the job of the host is again he's the host, he's the master of ceremonies. He's not the ceremony, he's not the
Yeah.
program. He's just the shepherd keeping things together. So his job is to keep things on track with the energy, with the timing, all that stuff. That really makes you a good host.
Mm. Finally, tell me this before we end it all off. How many times did you walk into a room or an event and people told you, Navid Bhai, tell me a joke?
It happens all the time, and it's just like if you're a doctor, especially in our part of the world, you go to a social event, you bump into a doctor, they say, "Well, I want I took a little coffee for you." In front of everybody, you're trying to get some free medical advice. So of
Yeah.
course, everybody, it's a very common thing. Can you tell me a joke? And sometimes if it's a doctor, I say, "Hey, you're a doctor. Can you do a vasectomy operation for me right now?" I kind of respond with a joke. But yes, it happens all. It's normal. It happens all the time. And
Well,
usually I respond. I don't respond with a joke. I respond in such a way that they laugh. So in other words, they did get a joke, but it was a very relevant something I
mm,
said relevant, rather than
subtle
just
one.
say two men walking to a restaurant.
Cool. Well, I guess we're at the end of it. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you coming, and I guess that's it.
Okay, thank you.